Big news out of Mexico this week. 3 financial institutions, including 2 that many foreigners rely on, were just sanctioned by the US government.
If you have an account with Intercam, CIBanco, or Vector Casa de Bolsa, or if you're planning to move money into Mexico, this is something you really need to know about.
We're going to break down what happened, what it means for your money, and what steps you can take right now to stay ahead of this.
We'll also share how this could affect your transfers from the US, especially if you use US banks or services like Zelle or wire transfers to fund your life here in Mexico.
On June 25, 2025, the US Treasury and FinCEN dropped a bombshell by designating 3 Mexican financial institutions as primary money laundering concerns. These are Intercam Banco, CIBanco, and Vector Casa de Bolsa.
This is the first time that the US has used a new legal tool under the Fentanyl Sanctions Act and the Fend Off Fentanyl Act. Essentially, they're accusing these institutions of helping move cartel money connected to fentanyl trafficking and precursor chemicals.
The accusations are serious, including laundering millions of dollars linked to the cartels. But keep in mind, these are still allegations, and the banks haven't been criminally charged yet.
Still, the US government is now blocking US banks and financial services from doing business with these Mexican institutions. And that creates some very real consequences for everyday people, especially foreigners banking here. Next, we'll talk about how all of this could affect you. But before we do that, we wanted to remind you that today is the last day to grab our exclusive 4-night deal in San Miguel de Allende. Our flash sale ends today, July 7th, 2025. If you've been thinking about booking your stay, now's the time to act.
We've had an amazing response so far, and we can't wait to welcome more of you to Antigua. In fact, we've had several of our one-on-one call clients jump on this deal, so we're looking forward to meeting you in person. So if you're interested, be sure to book before the clock runs out. Check the link in the description to secure your spot before it's all gone.
And if you're catching this video after July 7th, don't worry, you can still take advantage of our exclusive YouTube rates. Just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen. All right, now let's jump back into how these bank sanctions could affect you.
So what does this mean if you have an account with one of these banks or were planning to open one?
Here's the key thing. Your account is not frozen. You can still log in, use your debit card in Mexico, make local payments, but, and this is big, anything that touches a US bank or financial system could be blocked or delayed.
That includes direct deposits from your US Social Security or pension. It includes wire transfers from your American bank. It could even include automatic transfers to pay your mortgage or bills from a US bank account.
We've already heard from a few people who couldn't complete their monthly transfers or whose bank flagged the transaction because it involved Intercam. And keep in mind, this isn't just about large amounts. Even small transfers could get stuck.
If you use Wise, Remitly, or similar platforms, these may still work depending on their bank partners. But even they could eventually get caught up in restrictions if those partners are connected to the sanctioned banks. Let's walk through a few real-life scenarios. Maybe one of these sound familiar?
You're retired in Mexico, maybe San Miguel or Mexico City, and your US pension gets deposited into your Intercam account every month. That transfer could now be interrupted. Or you're closing on a house in Mexico and planning to wire down the payment from your US account to your Intercam trust. That could now get flagged or blocked by the US intermediary bank.
Maybe you're using CIBanco to pay your utility bills and you fund that account with monthly transfers from the US. Suddenly that routine transfer gets rejected or delayed, and now you're scrambling to pay your bills another way.
And here's a little history. When we first moved to Mexico over 16 years ago, Intercam was one of the most popular banks among foreigners because they accepted personal checks from US accounts. That was a really big deal back then. And even today, this was a big draw for older foreigners who are used to writing checks. In fact, I remember going and opening an Intercam account 16 years ago when we moved here because I could just write a check from our bank in San Francisco and they would just cash it and give me cash in pesos. And so that's how we all did it back then.
This was a great stepping stone to opening up a bank account in Mexico. In the meantime, you can just write a check and it's super easy.
Super easy.
Even recently, Intercam was still accepting US checks, which made life a lot easier for a lot of part-time residents.
So we totally understand why many people still use them. But now that convenience could turn into a complication, especially if the US keeps tightening restrictions.
That's why it's so important to be aware of how quickly things can shift and to have a plan B just in case.
Mexico's response has been a mix of skepticism and damage control. President Sheinbaum has criticized the U.S. for not providing hard evidence and says the sanctions are unfair.
Meanwhile, Mexico's banking regulator, CNBV, has temporarily taken control of all three banks, including Intercam and CIBanco's operations, to protect clients and keep things running.
That might sound scary, but it's actually meant to calm the markets. The goal is to keep depositors from panicking and pulling out their funds all at once.
As of now, all three banks are still operating, and most local transactions within Mexico are unaffected. But if you're relying on international financial flows, especially from the US, you could be facing obstacles very soon.
So what should you do? First, don't panic, but do take this seriously, especially if you rely on one of these banks for essential transfers.
Here's what we recommend. Avoid sending new wire transfers to Intercam or CIBanco. If you can, open a backup account with a bank that's not affected, like BBVA, Santander, HSBC. There's so many big banks out there.
Yeah. Consider using Wise for transfers, since they often partner with other banks that aren't sanctioned. And if you need to move funds soon, do it sooner rather than later.
And if you're just setting up your finances in Mexico, I would skip these three banks for now, at least until this situation clears up, if it does.
The situation is still evolving, and we'll update you if anything changes, but protecting your access to your own money should always be your top priority.
We wanted to quickly answer a few questions you might already be asking.
And remember, if you have more, drop them in the comments, and we are no experts, but we'll do our best to respond.
Are my funds safe in my Intercam or CIBanco account? As of now, yes. Your funds are not frozen, and the Mexican government has stepped in to stabilize operations.
But keep in mind, the issue isn't access inside of Mexico. It's getting new funds in from outside, especially from the US. That's where things are starting to break down.
Should I close my account?
Not necessarily. We're not saying you need to panic and pull everything out today.
But we do recommend opening a backup account at a different bank, one that hasn't been named in the sanctions. That way you have options if things escalate.
How do I know which Mexican banks are safe to use now? The big names that haven't been sanctioned, like BBVA, Santander, HSBC, Bancomer, and Banbajío, to name a few, are generally considered safer bets at this time.
That could always change, but right now, they're not on any US watch list, and they haven't been connected to any of the recent allegations.
What if I already sent money and it's stuck? First, check with your US bank or your transfer service. They may have already canceled or flagged it.
If it hasn't gone through, they might be able to reroute it or refund it, but it really depends on the financial institutions involved. Don't wait too long to follow up.
Can I still buy property through Intercam's trust division? We'd say not right now. If your closing depends on a wire transfer from a US account to Intercam, you could hit a serious delay or worse, a block.
Talk to your lawyer or agent immediately and consider switching to a neutral escrow account or a different trustee bank if possible.
Could other Mexican banks be next? Honestly, it's possible. These sanctions are part of a broader US crackdown on fentanyl trafficking and money laundering.
If other banks are found to have links to those networks, they could get swept up too. That's why we recommend keeping your financial setup flexible.
We know this isn't the kind of news anyone wants to hear, but staying informed is the best defense, especially when it comes to your money.
If you're unsure how this impacts your situation, whether you live here full-time, part-time, or are planning a move, we offer one-on-one consultations and we're happy to help you sort through it.
And if you've been affected already, let us know in the comments. Your experience might help someone else in our community.
Stay safe, stay smart, and we'll see you in our next video.
Bye, everybody.